What if everything you thought you knew about your own mind, about time, about reality itself, what if it was all built on a myth?
Hmm.
And not just, a simple misunderstanding, but something fundamental. A really deeply ingrained assumption that shapes how you see the world and yourself in it.
That's a powerful starting point.
Yeah, that's the kind of mind-bending question we absolutely love to grapple with here on the Deep Dive. Our mission, as always, is to take a towering stack of sources,
Yeah.
cutting-edge articles, groundbreaking research, our own notes, and really boil it down.
Extract the core insight.
Exactly. Give you that shortcut to being truly well-informed, offer up some surprising facts, maybe a little thought-provoking humor, just enough to keep you hooked.
Get people thinking differently.
Precisely. And today, we are not just dipping our toes in. We are plunging headfirst into some truly profound ideas. Ideas that challenge the very foundations of how we perceive, well, everything.
It's good fundamental stuff.
It is. We're going to embark on a deep dive into the compelling work of Skylar Fiction, particularly from their seminal work, The Mind of the Cosmos, a decentralized theory of self, time, and thought.
A provocative title.
It is, but don't let it intimidate you. This isn't just about abstract physics or, obscure neuroscience, though we'll definitely touch on
Yes,
that.
what part of the picture?
But no, this deep dive is really about unsettling the very grammar of being. It's about fundamentally challenging how we understand our own self, that elusive I, and our true place in this vast unfolding universe.
Hmm.
Our mission today, unpack this truly radical, maybe even unsettling idea that fiction lays out so clearly. What if there is no center at all?
That's right. Scholar fiction's core argument, and we'll be exploring this in quite a bit of detail today,
Hmm.
is that the universe is far less like a throne room.
Right, with a king or something in charge.
Exactly. Less like that, and much more like a vast, intricate, self-organizing neural net. It's not something commanded from one single dominant point. It's deeply, fundamentally entangled, woven together from countless interacting parts.
So interconnected.
Deeply. And this deep dive, it's going to illuminate a pretty fascinating journey. It shows how science, often quietly, almost incrementally, has been dismantling this whole architecture of centralization
In lots of different areas.
across so many different
Yeah.
fields, yeah. We'll look at examples from, the grand scale of relativistic physics right down to the minute workings of our own biology and consciousness.
Wow.
And this sustained scientific inquiry, it's slowly but surely leading us to a truly revolutionary understanding. That meaning, paradoxically, maybe arises not from a single point,
Not from the center.
not from the center, but from multiplicity, from distributed elements, from the rich dynamic interplay of countless interactions. So, yeah, prepare to have your fundamental assumptions not just questioned, but maybe rewired a bit.
Okay, I'm ready. Let's do it. Okay, let's unpack this. The myth of the center. This is really the bedrock, isn't it? The foundational idea fiction builds on.
Absolutely. It's the starting point.
For so long, I mean, stretching back millennia into philosophy, theology, we've been conditioned almost instinctively to believe in centers.
It seems natural, doesn't it,
Yeah.
to look for a central point.
Totally. Think about, the history. For centuries, our world was geocentric. Earth, the center, everything revolves around us.
Placed humanity right at the heart of it all.
Exactly. Then, even after Copernicus and Galileo shifted things to a sun-centered system, the idea of a fixed center just persisted. It just
Right.
moved.
The structure remained, just relocated.
Right. Or think about the body. For ages, the heart was the seat of thought, emotion, the command station.
Made intuitive sense, it beats, it feels central.
Yeah. And even when science moved control to the brain, we still kept that idea of a single control room, didn't we?
The mind behind the eyes.
Like a little captain in the skull's control tower giving orders.
The homunculus idea, yeah.
These were really comforting ideas, though, weren't they? They gave us orientation, a solid axis for meaning in a confusing universe, predictability, order.
A sense of stability?
But as fiction puts it so well, that scaffolding, it's collapsing now.
The old certainties are crumbling.
And with that collapse comes this deeply unsettling, but also maybe incredibly liberating question. What if there is no center at all? What if that basic assumption was just an illusion? A useful one, maybe, but still limited.
It's a profound challenge to our worldview.
It really is. It forces us to consider a totally different architecture for reality. And fiction's opening analogy nails it. What if the universe is not built like a throne room, but like a neural net?
Not commanded.
But entangled. Yeah. Imagine the difference. A monarchy, power flows top down, versus this huge self-organizing network where intelligence, action, it all just arises from billions of connections.
Spontaneous, interconnected
It's
interactions.
a leap fiction asks us to make. It's huge.
And what's truly fascinating, if you zoom out a bit, is how different branches of science, especially over the last 100 years or so, have systematically, sometimes without even meaning to, dismantled this very architecture of centralization.
Across different fields, you said.
Across numerous, seemingly unrelated disciplines, it's not isolated. It's this pervasive trend that fiction weaves together so expertly.
Okay, like what? Give us some examples.
Well, take physics. Foundational stuff. Albert Einstein, with special relativity, he showed that time isn't absolute. It's not this universal clock ticking the same for everyone.
Right, the whole twin paradox idea.
Exactly. Time is relative. It depends on how you're moving. Someone on a fast spaceship experiences time slower than someone on Earth. It wasn't just a weird finding. It fundamentally cracked that idea of a single master clock.
No central timekeeper.
Precisely. Then you dive into quantum mechanics. The act of observing. It's not passive.
Like looking through a window.
Not at all. The observer actively shapes the system. Think about the double slit experiment. Particles act differently depending on if you watch them.
As waves or particles. Wild.
Means the observer is part of the reality they see. Giovannetti, Lloyd, and McCone highlighted how measurement changes the system. Our attention isn't neutral.
Okay, so physics.
Yeah.
What else?
Neuroscience. Our understanding of self-awareness has moved way beyond a single seat of the soul.
No little man in the brain.
Nope. Research like Fedorenko's shows it arises from a complex constellation of specialized networks working together dynamically. No single I button. Consciousness emerges from distributed activity.
Like an orchestra, maybe?
That's a good analogy. And even in speculative physics, you have ideas like Gunther Klatechka's three-dimensional time. Maybe time isn't a hallway, but pulses outward in multiple dimensions.
Whoa, okay, that's up there.
It is speculative, but it challenges the simple linear view.
Yeah.
And then there's systems biology. The humble starfish.
Ah, the starfish, right.
Thinks, grows, regenerates limbs without a brain. A living example of complex functions emerging from a distributed network. Its resilience is its lack of a center.
That's incredible.
And what's really striking, fiction hammers this home, is these discoveries challenge more than just old science models. They unsettle the very grammar of being. We always assumed meaning flowed from centers, gods, kings, unified egos. But maybe, fiction suggests, meaning arises from multiplicity. Like a city's meaning isn't in City Hall, but in the interactions of its people.
The life of the streets.
Exactly. Our own purpose might not be one big truth, but emerge from the interplay of all our experiences, relationships, even our contradictions, from the shifting relationships between distributed parts.
That's a huge pivot. So fiction's saying the self, this I, it's not a fixed thing in one place.
Not at all. It's emergent phenomena, born from interplay connections, a dynamic dance, not some static core.
And fiction uses those analogies. They're pretty vivid. Identity doesn't reside in the skull's throne room, but weaves itself across systems of thought, sensation, memory, biology, and language.
Weaving, not residing.
Let's pause on those comparisons because they're deep. Like a quantum system, it's distorted by observation.
Just looking at it changes it.
Like a nonlinear equation, it loops.
Recursive spirals, not straight lines.
Like a starfish, it regenerates.
Healing capacity from any part.
Like space-time, it folds.
Fluid, interconnected, defying simple linearity. It's so different from the old view. You're not a clock, not code, not a soul uploaded into a skull. What are you then?
You're a fluid, recursive expression of a decentralized cosmos. Flickering into coherence, then rippling back out. Dynamic, always changing.
And this brings us to the core paradox, doesn't it? Fiction embraces it fully. Saying there's no center isn't denying order.
Right, it's not just chaos.
Not at all. It's seeking order in new geometries. Not pyramids, but webs.
Interconnectedness.
Not kings, but councils.
Shared influence.
Not fixed truths, but living patterns. If there's a central truth here, it's paradoxical. There is no center.
And fiction says that's where the beauty begins.
Exactly. It's liberating.
Yeah.
Opens us up to a richer understanding.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. Let's talk about time. For centuries, it felt so simple, right? So intuitive.
Objective. Like a ruler.
Yeah, ticking like a perfect metronome, the same for everyone, everywhere. Isaac Newton called it absolute, true, and mathematical, this universal river flowing evenly.
And comforting idea.
Totally. It created this illusion of a shared present, a predictable future, a consistent self moving along one timeline with everyone else, marching to the same cosmic beat.
Synchronized existence.
But then Einstein came along.
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
yes, Albert Einstein cracked that clock wide open
With his 1905 paper.
on the electrodynamics of moving bodies, introduced something revolutionary. His core argument was simple but profound. The speed of light is constant for everyone, no matter how they're moving.
The universal speed limit.
Right. Now think, if that's constant, something else has to give way. And what gives? Our common sense idea of simultaneity.
It's happening at the same time?
Exactly. What seems simultaneous to you, someone moving differently, might see happen at different times, maybe even in a different order. Einstein said it clearly. Simultaneity is not an absolute concept, but a relative one. It wasn't just tweaking physics. It was a seismic shift. It means there's no single universal now.
No shared cosmic heartbeat.
Nope. Each observer basically lives in their own personal temporal bubble. Your now is your now. My now is distinct, especially if we're moving differently. Undermines the whole idea of a central moment.
So, okay, beyond the physics, what does this mean for us? If time can fracture like that, fiction says identity can too.
That's the argument. Think about it. Our sense of self is so deeply tied to time, isn't it?
Memory of the past, plans for the future.
Locating ourselves in a story, a narrative, cause and effect in a line. But if relativity destabilizes that grammar, if time isn't fixed and universal,
Then the story of me gets unfixed too.
the I becomes less solid, less unchanging, more a creature of context, stretched across multiple potential timelines depending on perspective. Less autobiography, more improv.
That's a trip.
And it has huge metaphysical implications. That old image of God as the watchmaker setting an absolute timeline, it just collapses.
Time isn't handed down from above.
It's co-constructed by the observers within it. No throne outside time. Only the net of interconnected observers and events. And, as fiction says starkly, we are caught in it. Our presence shapes our temporal reality.
Okay, but does this just mean chaos? If there's no universal clock, is time meaningless?
That's the immediate fear, right?
Yeah.
But fiction clarifies. No, not chaos, not meaningless. It means meaning itself has to flex, adapt.
Okay.
No single direction, but many relative trajectories. Memory isn't just a fixed recording, it's an active construction, reshaped constantly.
And looking ahead.
Anticipation becomes improvisation, engaging with possibilities. The self isn't a traveler down a linear hallway anymore.
What is it then?
It's a node, connected, recursive, feeding back into itself. Unstable, yes, but in a way that allows for redefinition, growth.
So Einstein didn't just break Newton's equations.
He shattered the myth of the center, at least for a universal now. That unified moment was a comforting illusion.
Helpful maybe, but not the full picture.
Exactly. What remains is stranger, maybe more honest. The simple linearity we crave isn't the whole story. We don't walk through time.
We fold within it.
Yeah, beautiful and disorienting. Makes you rethink everything.
Okay, so time is relative, dynamic. Now, let's switch gears a bit to observation itself. Another thing fiction wants us to rethink.
The act of looking.
In classical physics, observation was clean, right? Objective. You could peek into a system, measure it without messing it up.
Like a scientist behind glass, untouched.
Gave us that sense of detachment, a clear line, observer observed. But in the quantum realm, that just falls apart.
Completely. Here, the observer isn't a bystander, they're a participant, a co-author of what appears. And that changes everything.
Co-author. How so?
This is where quantum metrology comes in, the science of measuring quantum systems very precisely. It reveals this deep paradox. The more precisely you try to know something quantum,
The more you distort it.
or rather, the more you collapse its potential into just one outcome. Giovanetti, Lloyd, and Marconi explained how quantum entanglement, that weird pairing of particles,
Spooky action at a distance.
right, how that can boost measurement sensitivity way beyond classical limits. They can get higher resolution than any classical strategy, super precise info.
Okay, sounds good so far. But there's a catch.
There's a cost, a big one. When you push past the Heisenberg limit, that fundamental boundary about knowing certain pairs of properties like position and momentum.
You can't know both perfectly.
Right. When you push for ultimate precision on one, the system dissolves its multiple possibilities into a single, definite outcome. if you know exactly where an electron is.
You lose where it's going.
Exactly. Its momentum becomes uncertain. Fiction calls it a quantum death, not literal death, but a death of possibility. You get a precise number, but you lose all the nuance, all the other things it could have been just before you looked.
You know what it is, but not what it could have been.
Precisely. Observation forces a choice.
Okay, subatomic particles. Fine. But what does this mean for us, for people? Fiction sees a connection.
A deep, resonant connection. Fiction argues this tension, precision versus collapse isn't just physics. It's a human problem. What if people behave the same way?
How?
What if identity itself resists sharp, fixed definition like a quantum particle? Think about it.
No.
Under intense scrutiny, social pressure, therapy, even trying to define your true self,
We kind of solidify.
we collapse.
Fun-
We present a specific version, a knowable face, often what's expected, but the full self, like a quantum state, is a field of possibilities, context-sensitive, indeterminate, truly coming alive only through interaction, not when pinned down.
So trying to define someone too clearly actually changes them.
It limits them in a way, and what's really fascinating, fiction is careful here. They clarify, we're not saying humans are quantum particles.
Okay, important distinction.
It's metaphor, powerful analogy, not ontology. But the structural resonance is undeniable. Both systems show. Knowledge isn't innocent. Naming changes the named. Watching warps the watched.
That's profound. Knowledge isn't neutral.
And for fiction, this isn't just a thought experiment. It's a cautionary tale. It urges what they call epistemic humility,
Meaning?
recognizing the limits of our knowledge and the impact our attempts to know have. Approach people gently. Observe without rigid assumptions. Remember, the self, like a wave function, is most alive when it stays open.
Knowing someone too precisely might diminish them.
Wow.
Yeah. So in this view, identity isn't a fixed essence you possess.
What is it then?
It's a dynamic choreography. Collapsed into form through relationship, interaction, the roles we play. Fluid in solitude, born and reborn in interaction. We don't possess selves.
We perform them.
We perform them, exactly. And like all performances, they can be beautiful, terrifying, and tragically misunderstood when we try to freeze them into one static image.
Let's talk about linearity. It's such a seductive myth, isn't it? We love its simplicity.
Thanks follows effect. A leads to B, leads to C, clean.
Yeah. We want wounds to heal in a straight line, growth to be steady, lives to follow a clear arc. It gives us comfort, predictability, a sense of control.
But real life, our actual experience, it rarely honors that neat arc, does it?
Not really. We live in loops.
We grieve in spirals, revisiting old pains from new angles. We love and lose in patterns that feel more like fractals.
Repeating complex forms at different scales. New complexities emerging.
Exactly. Not a straight line at all.
And this is where physicist Boris Kupperschmidt's work becomes incredibly relevant for understanding the self. His work is on nonlinear generalizations of classical equations.
Okay, nonlinear. What does that mean exactly?
It means the real world doesn't just run on clean, predictable math.
Right.
Think of a simple chain. A causes B, B causes C. That's linear. Classical models often assume that kind of stability.
Like dominoes.
Right. Elegant, powerful, but incomplete. They break down when systems feed back on themselves.
Feedback.
A nonlinear system is more like an echo chamber or microphone feedback. The output re-enters as input, creates this self-referential, often chaotic, but incredibly dynamic loop.
Okay, I get that screeching sound.
Kupperschmidt showed these feedback loops are everywhere, weather, biology, and what's fascinating is how directly this applies to the mind.
The mind is a feedback system.
Absolutely. If it's anything, it's that. Thoughts influence emotions, influence actions, which create new thoughts. Identity, in this light, isn't static product you reach.
What is it?
An emergent behavior, a recursive field, constantly shaped by past states, environment, those inner loops of memory, trauma, desire, belief. Fiction is clear. This is not a metaphor, it is a framework.
A framework for understanding the dynamic, unpredictable nature of who we are.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting, maybe a bit unsettling, but true. Think about your own life. Your brain doesn't just remember events. It remembers its own thoughts.
Reinforcing pathways.
The self comments on itself, judging, analyzing, narrating. We hate ourselves for hating something. We forgive ourselves but still doubt our sincerity.
That's recursion right there, the self-looping back.
And in nonlinear systems, recursion can generate patterns too complex to predict easily, patterns that look chaotic but have hidden order, but definitely not too complex to feel.
To experience intimately, to struggle with, or celebrate.
No, I can hear someone thinking, okay, but doesn't this just romanticize fragmentation? Isn't identity just a mess then?
It's a valid concern. Does it mean abandoning structure?
Right. Fiction addresses this.
Directly. Recognizing nonlinearity isn't abandoning structure or just celebrating chaos. It's about describing the structure honestly, acknowledging its dynamism, its complexity, instead of forcing it into a rigid linear box that just doesn't fit, finding a different kind of order.
Okay, so there is order in the storm.
Absolutely. Not the fixed order of a single ego, but the order of an attractor.
An attractor, like a magnet.
Not quite an object, more like a dynamic pattern. A set of recurring tendencies or behaviors around which our chaos swirls. We repeat ourselves, repeat patterns.
Habits, core beliefs, emotional responses.
It's exactly. Not necessarily failure, but because repetition is how nonlinearity builds identity. It's how patterns emerge and persist in a dynamic system. It creates a recognizable you amidst the flex.
Okay, that makes sense. But it raises a tough question.
Morality, accountability.
Yeah. If the self is this looping, shifting system, how do we hold it morally accountable? What counts as coherence or integrity in a soul that never truly settles?
That's a huge question. Fiction suggests the answer isn't finding one single I to blame or forgive.
What then?
It's learning to listen to the entire chorus of selves, acknowledging the multiplicity, the recursive dialogue within. Responsibility becomes distributed across the system.
Not located in one central spot.
Right, a profound shift. The self in this model isn't a computer, not a cathedral. It is a storm system.
Predictable in parts.
Unstable at its edges, constantly shifting, interacting, terrifying in its unpredictability maybe, sacred in its complexity, and wonderfully profoundly alive in its unfolding nature.
Let's keep pushing on these assumptions. Another big one we just take for granted. How we imagine time.
The default image.
We almost always see it as a hallway, right? One direction, one light at the end, usually death. One self walking forward, moment by moment.
Predictably, relentlessly, birth to death.
It's a comforting image, maybe, in its simplicity, even if it's a bit grim. But what if time isn't a hallway? What if it's a cathedral?
Ah, that's a powerful shift in metaphor.
A huge space, light from everywhere, paths crossing.
And this brings us to Gunther Kletschka's radical speculative model. He proposes time might not be just one dimension, but three.
3 dimensions of time, like space.
The orthogonal axes, time, t independent yet interwoven. Picturing it is hard, our brains aren't wired for it. But imagine moving not just forward, but sideways, up and down within time's fabric.
Okay, whoa.
This temporal geometry invites us to see time not as a line, but a volume. Not a fuse burning down, but a vast multidimensional field. Changes it from a constraint to a medium.
A field we move within.
Exactly. Now, we have to be clear. As fiction is, this is speculative.
Not proven like relativity.
Right. Critics point that out. But speculation isn't abandoning rigor. It's asking daring questions when the old maps stop working. And our one-dimensional map of time, it feels incomplete, doesn't it? It's breaking down.
How so? What evidence suggests it's incomplete?
Think about psychological studies. Our perception of time isn't constant. It warps dramatically.
Like during trauma, seconds feel like hours.
Or flow states where hours vanish, grief where time freezes or crawls, addiction where the future shrinks, awe where time stands still.
Yeah, okay. We've all felt that.
In those moments, the past feels present. The future leaks into memory. Fiction argues these aren't just brain glitches. They're signs our simple 1D model fails to capture the richness of human experience. Our experience demands more.
So what does this mean for me, for you, the listener, right now? In Kletschka's model, you don't just move through time like on a train.
You move within it, like a swimmer in a multidirectional current, diving deeper, surfacing, moving laterally.
So one axis might be chronology.
The sequence of events. Another could be memory, constantly revisited, reshaped.
Yeah.
A third might hold dreams, imagined futures, possibilities existing alongside the present, influencing it.
So we're not just passengers, we're navigators.
Navigators, actively engaging with time's complex topography, shifting perspective, moving through its depths.
How fundamentally does that change things if we really imagine time this way?
Fiction outlines several profound implications, truly paradigm shifting. First, healing. It becomes radically possible.
How?
If time is a volume, not a fixed track, you aren't trapped by past trauma. You can rotate within it, revisit moments from new angles, gain insight, rewrite your relationship to them.
Not erase them, but change their meaning.
Exactly. Identity becomes regenerative, like that starfish regrowing a limb. The self can return to wounded timelines and reform itself, integrate the past differently.
Wow. Okay, what else?
Second, morality deepens. If you exist across overlapping timelines, angry yesterday, promising tomorrow, struggling with a childhood choice, you're in dialogue with multiple versions of yourself.
So accountability
It
multiplies.
does. You're responsible not just for today, but for who you were and who you're still becoming across these dimensions.
Yeah.
Expands ethical self-reflection.
Okay. And third,
Theology opens up. If God isn't outside time but folded through it, interwoven,
hmm,
maybe. She sees you not as a fixed sequence, a linear story,
still says,
a living topography, a complex, trembling terrain of possibility and pain, a landscape of becoming, not a static snapshot, changes the divine relationship from distant judge to intimate presence.
Klitschko's work, even if theoretical, it doesn't just stretch physics, it stretches the soul.
Absolutely. Time becomes more than a march toward death. It becomes a medium for transformation, healing, deeper responsibility.
So let's abandon the hallway.
Let's step into the cathedral.
The light, as fiction says, is coming from more than one direction, illuminating a much richer reality. Think about this for a second. Simple biology, but with huge implications. Cut off a spider's head.
It dies. Game over. Central command gone.
Right. But sever a starfish's limb.
It grows back. And sometimes that limb becomes a whole new starfish.
Why? What's the difference?
No central brain, no single command center. It thinks with its body, feels with its distributed network, acts from localized intelligence.
That's not just cool biology, that's philosophy in action, isn't it? Challenges our assumptions about control.
It's a perfect segue into Ori Brafman and Rod Beckstrom's book, The Starfish and the Spider. They argue decentralization isn't weakness, it's resilience,
Yeah.
adaptability, strength.
They give examples.
Compelling ones.
Yeah.
Apache tribes resisting conquest for generations, not by having a central chief easy to target, but by dissolving into dynamic, autonomous bands, almost impossible to pin down, or digitally. BitTorrent, sharing massive files without a central server. Wikipedia thriving because it lacks central control, not despite it. Their strength is their distributed nature.
Okay, so organizations. But fiction connects this to the mind.
That's the core argument here. What if this isn't just how organizations survive? What if this is how minds survive and function?
Instead of the spider model.
Central ego in charge?
Exactly, that's the conventional model. But brain damage studies tell a different story, more like the starfish. Think about stroke victims regaining language.
Not by fixing one spot, but rewiring.
Right, recruiting other areas. Or kids with hemispherectomies, half their brain removed, who grow up speaking fluently because the other half adapts, takes over.
That's incredible resilience.
Or individuals with dissociative identity disorder, functioning with distinct compartmentalized selves, each coherent yet part of one system. These aren't just broken brains. Fiction argues the starfish model isn't just poetry. It's an empirical description of how complex systems, including minds, operate without a fixed center, gaining strength from distribution. Okay, I can hear the objection, though. My brain isn't that chaotic. Surely there's some coordination. Even jazz has a leader sometimes, right? How does fiction handle that need for a control point?
That's an excellent point, and fiction absolutely concedes there's coordination. But the crucial difference is the nature of it. Think of that jazz ensemble again. It's the perfect analogy.
No single conductor dictating everything.
Exactly. It's dynamic interplay. Players listening, responding, adapting, improvising together. The mind might not be leaderless chaos, but its leadership rotates. It's distributed, emergent.
So the prefrontal cortex, the executive.
Isn't a king on a throne, it's a soloist. Sometimes dominant for a complex task, sometimes stepping back, supporting other voices. Important, yes, but not absolute or exclusive.
And this shift in metaphor, monarch to mosaic, spider to starfish, it really matters, doesn't it?
Hugely. When we see the mind as a mosaic, a network, we make room for internal contradiction, for profound recovery, for multiplicity. We create space for fractured stories, for nonlinear grieving, for adapting, shifting, yet remaining real and coherent in our own way. Acknowledges the complexity.
So how does this reframe things like mental illness?
It offers a powerful reframing. Maybe mental illness isn't always or even mainly a broken part, a faulty circuit. Maybe it's often discoordination among the parts.
Like an orchestra out of tune.
Exactly. Depression isn't just a broken circuit, it's a collapsed harmony, a loss of improvisational flow. Healing, then, isn't fixing a single broken center.
It's retuning the whole song.
Finding new ways for the parts, the cells, to play together, listen, find a new emergent harmony.
And this leads to more responsibility, not less.
Significantly more. If the self is a chorus, you have to learn to listen to every voice, even the uncomfortable ones. If it's an ecosystem, balance is a moral imperative. You must care for each part, even those you'd rather ignore. Fiction sums it up powerfully. There is no throne in the head. There is a round table, and around it, yourselves speak. It's a call to internal democracy, holistic engagement.
We used to believe, maybe subconsciously, in that little man behind the eyes, the homunculus.
The watcher, the driver.
Yeah, this single eye in the cockpit issuing orders, the sovereign ruler.
And that myth died slowly, didn't it?
Yeah.
Undone by neurology, psychology, brain scans.
But myths die hard. We still talk about myself like it's singular, even now.
It's baked into our language. But groundbreaking neuroscience keeps dismantling it. Take that 2023 study in Nature Neuroscience by Evelina Fedorenko and colleagues.
What did they find?
They meticulously showed complex things like language and abstract thought aren't housed in isolated brain regions. They're distributed across what they call a mosaic of specialized network.
A mosaic, yeah.
Meaning each process, understanding, memory, naming, inner speech, activates different nodes in this network. And these nodes shift dynamically depending on the context. No single thinking seat, no throne of self.
So it's not fragmentation, like broken pieces.
No, quite the opposite. It's emergence. How unified experiences arise from interacting parts. Think about it. Remembering a smell involves the hippocampus, maybe emotion circuits. Forming a sentence uses Broca's area, Wernicke's. Maybe feeling the emotion involves the limbic system.
All working together.
Like a choir. A polyphony of consciousness, improvising coherence from seeming dissonance. Dynamic, collaborative, more jazz jam session than rigid symphony.
I still hear the critics saying, but something must be coordinating this. There has to be a conductor.
And yes, fiction absolutely acknowledges executive function, feedback inhibition, prefrontal integration. Those processes exist. They create cohesion.
But it's not a CEO.
Not a CEO barking orders. It's like that jazz ensemble again, shifting solos, adapting. The conductor, if there is one, isn't a person or a fixed entity. It's a process. An ongoing dynamic of interaction. The flow itself creates the leadership.
Okay, so what does this mean for us, for suffering, for healing?
Huge implications. In this mosaic model, when someone dissociates, loses memory, spirals into mania, fragments under trauma, it's not necessarily the collapse of a self.
What might it be then?
It might be the surfacing of previously silent voices in the mosaic, or a temporary discoordination. The system gets noisy, discordant, distressing, hard to navigate but not unreal. It's a different configuration, a shifted harmony, not annihilation.
So healing isn't forcing a return to an original song.
Maybe not. Maybe it's allowing a new harmony to emerge from the chaos. A new coherent arrangement of the mosaic, integrating all the parts.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to abandon the ego as monarch fantasy.
Completely. The brain doesn't possess a self-like property. It performs one. And that performance is modular, plastic, adaptable, alive. Even reading this right now
The scent
requires this flickering choreography. Occipital lobe, Wernicke's area, attention, self-referential loops. It's a miracle of coordination, as fiction starkly puts it. You are not reading this. You are being assembled to read this.
assembled. Wow.
A collaborative, emergent act, not a singular entity doing the reading.
So if we are these assembled, performing selves, agency doesn't dissolve. Our ability to choose.
On the contrary, it deepens. The more you recognize your mosaic nature, the more you have to become its curator.
Selecting, arranging elements.
The translator, understanding the different voices, a responsible listener to the internal chorus.
To be human, in this view, isn't to be perfectly unified and static.
It's to be in negotiation.
Constant negotiation. A dynamic dialogue with all your parts and the world.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground. From the cosmos and time to our own minds, challenging these deep assumptions.
It's been quite a journey through fiction's ideas.
Let's try and bring it all together, revisiting that central theme, dismantling the myth of the center. Fiction suggests if there is a God, she doesn't sit on a distant throne.
Separate, observing from above.
No, she pulses through equations, blooms through neurons, loops through time, dreams through distributed minds, not watching from above, unfolding from within.
Immanent, interwoven. The cosmos isn't a kingdom with one ruler. It's maybe a consciousness. And we, each of us, are one of its ways of knowing itself.
A local expression of a grander, decentralized intelligence.
We saw Einstein dismantle the universal clock, revealing relative time. Quantum theory dismantled the passive observer, entangling us with reality.
Nonlinear dynamics unraveled simple predictability, showing feedback loops.
Neuroscience disassembled the singular ego, Fractal time and decentralized systems reframed identity not anchored, but arising, entangled, in flux.
Which brings us back to that skeptic's question, the very human one. Okay, if nothing's central, how do we live? Who decides? Who's responsible? Isn't it just chaos?
And fiction's answer isn't chaos, it's care.
Care, exactly. Living without a single center isn't floating aimlessly. It's learning a deeper skill. Holding paradox without collapsing. Building ritual and meaning from recursion, finding rhythm in the dynamic, composing a life like jazz.
Through listening, adaptation, trust in the process.
Trust in the emergent intelligence of the whole. This cosmology doesn't deny integration, coherent wholes forming. It just asks us not to mistake the conductor for the music.
Or the finger pointing at the moon for the moon.
Precisely. Yes, the prefrontal cortex matters. Memory matters. Emergent hubs matter. They're vital for coherence. But they aren't the ultimate source. They're symptoms, manifestations of a deeper relational intelligence. A mind, a cosmos woven in time, community, feedback, perpetual becoming.
And responsibility, in this view, it's not diluted.
It's profoundly distributed, spread across the whole network of you. When the mind's a mosaic, ethic isn't about singular intention. It's collective resonance, how all parts harmonize.
Healing isn't going back.
It's letting fragments form a new chord, stronger for the breaks. Forgiving isn't erasing, it's accepting that even shattered selves can sing a new song.
So what does it mean then to live in this mind of the cosmos, to embrace this decentralized view?
It means knowing your thoughts aren't just yours alone. They're part of a larger process, echoing. Knowing your identity isn't a fragile thing to protect, but something dynamic to refine, engage with, release, reform.
And our pain, memories, love.
Not just proof of a singular soul. They're signals from a layered, evolving self, striving for coherence, finding its harmony in the cosmic symphony.
A symphony that's always playing.
And in that continuous becoming, that striving, that finding new harmonies, we glimpse the sacred. We're not at the isolated center. We're part of something infinitely centered, distributed everywhere.
Echoes of a larger self.
Flickering, folding in time, collapsing into coherence for a moment, then releasing back into possibility, ready for the next improvisation.
Knowing this isn't despair, it's freedom.
It is freedom. You are not just a static being, a noun. You are a becoming, a verb, a field, a ripple, a thought God is having through the architecture of light itself.